Single parents, New Orleans, and Alan Freed are all on this day. Welcome back to On This Day. Today's date is March 21st, 2022. It is the 80th day of the year. We got 285 days left. It is the 12th Monday in the 13th week and the second day of spring. Congratulations, we made it to spring. Now we got 92 days till summer. And if today's your birthday, you're an Aries. Congratulations. Today is National Single Parent Day. On March 21st, National Single Parent Day honors the mothers and fathers holding down the fort with all the hard work, devotion, and sacrifice involved in single parenting. Raising children can be challenging. I'll tell you what, there's two of us, and I had a hard time. I'm sure my wife did too. Anyway, when you're doing it without a partner, it's extra pain in the butt. Whether by choice or circumstance, single parents carry a heavy load between work, school, daycare, doctor's visits. The list goes on. One person can only do so much. Sadly, when that's the case, you got a higher than average chance of your kid falling between the cracks and having some issues. So, a single parent, give them all the help you can. All right, let's see what else March 21st has given us. 1788, a fire in New Orleans leaves most of the town in ruins. Now keep in mind, this was pretty much all wood buildings at this point, and it was a very small town, and most of it was at this point burned to the ground. I wonder how many towns back then burnt down that if they wouldn't, they would have turned into some big giant city like New Orleans. We have some major cities in this country right now. It would have been great if they would have burnt to the ground a long time ago, but they're still there. 1800, with the church leadership driven out of Rome during an armed conflict, Pius VII is crowned Pope in Venice with a temporary papal tiara made of paper mache. After he blessed it, it was now called papal mache. 1925, the Butler Act prohibits the teaching of human evolution in Tennessee. I'm actually working on a video for the other channel on that subject. Should be out Monday. 1928, Charles Lindbergh is presented with the Medal of Honor for the first solo transatlantic flight. So that one has always bugged me. Great, he did this. He flew across the Atlantic. That's a very brave thing to do for the equipment that he had back in the day. But the Medal of Honor is almost always awarded for heroism in combat. There was no combating the elements. What's the deal with that? I don't know. Always had a problem with that one. 1946, the Los Angeles Rams signed Kenny Washington, making him the first African-American player in professional American football since 1933. 1952, Alan Freed presents the Moondog Coronation Ball, the first rock and roll concert in Cleveland, Ohio. Alan Freed was a Cleveland, Ohio disc jockey who started playing rock and roll. He is actually the dude that coined the phrase rock and roll, and that's why you have the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame in Cleveland. 1965, Martin Luther King Jr. leads 3,200 people on the start of the third and finally successful civil rights march from Selma to Montgomery, Alabama. 1970, the first Earth Day proclamation is issued by the mayor of San Francisco. 1994, the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change enters into force, meaning it gets started. That's what it says on their website, enters into force. Enters into force sounds kind of strange. What is that, like they're kicking butt and taking names? What goes on there? 1999, Bertrand Piccard and Brian Jones become the first to circumnavigate the Earth in a hot air balloon. I never understood the fascination with hot air balloons. It just doesn't even make sense to me. And when you're doing something like circumnavigating the Earth, you're supposed to be doing it to kind of like further things. Like when Lindbergh went across the Atlantic Ocean, he was taking a new technology for the time, the airplane, and how far it had come could finally get them across the Atlantic Ocean. Hot air balloons? Are we bringing those back as a mode of transportation or something like that? Didn't we learn our lesson with the Hindenburg? 2006, the social media site Twitter is founded. So Twitter is an interesting company in a lot of different ways. The social impact that it's had on society is just good and bad, I guess you could say. These days, I find it as nothing but bad. Twitter is a toxic environment. Regardless, its origin story is pretty interesting. Twitter's origins lie in a day-long brainstorming session held by board members of a podcasting company. It was almost like a microblogging thing. That's what some people call it, microblogging. Others call it a social network. It's really hard to define what it is. In the beginning, what I've kind of gathered from what it was like in the beginning, it was almost like a group chat that you do with, your friends and family. That's how they sort of used it in the beginning. Noah Glass and Jack Dorsey, who was their CEO till just recently, they kind of used it in this podcasting company as like a messaging service back and forth from each other, but they had bigger plans for it. The original project code name was given some letters. It was TWTTR. And in the end, they came out with Twitter, from tweets like a little bird and all that stuff. But the problem was Twitter.com was already taken. 6 months after its launch, they actually purchased Twitter.com from its owner. When I was working at Comcast, I talked to a customer who was actually sort of a bigwig, I guess, at Twitter. And he said he worked for Twitter. And I said, yeah, I'm on Twitter. I just don't use it. I mean, I just never go back to it. And I was telling him that it's not like Facebook. I'm not on all the time. And he said, well, yeah, that's our biggest problem. A lot of people just use it a day, a month, and that's it. And we talked for a few minutes. And he said they're working on some other things. And they bought Periscope, which is video service, and a few other things they did, like Vine. But for the longest time, Twitter really never took off. And then in 2007, the South by Southwest Interactive Conference happened, and Twitter went from about 20,000 tweets a day to 60,000 over like a weekend. Hundreds of concert goers were kind of keeping tabs on what was going on via Twitter. Twitter until 2013 really, I don't know, it didn't gain traction like the Facebooks and YouTube of the world. It was just kind of there. And then, during the Super Bowl on February 3rd, 2013, the power went out at the Mercedes-Benz Superdome. And that's when this executive named Lisa Mann, who had something to do with Oreos, tweeted, "You could still dunk in the dark" during the power outage. And for Twitter, and a lot of us, the world changed. People realized that Twitter could be used for humor, communicating things. It was like this lightning bolt moment for Twitter, and everyone was talking about it on the news. People that didn't know about Twitter before that now knew about Twitter. People were logging on to Twitter. People were starting Twitter accounts, including internet trolls. Whether it's from Russia or whatever, during the 2016 election, Twitter played a big part in what we now know as fake news. Twitter was weaponized and basically affected the American election and a lot of other elections over time with fake news. We didn't know much about fake news because a lot of people just assumed if it was on the internet, it was true. So many people just retweeted stuff. And this was going on Facebook too, not just Twitter, but Twitter turned into this just weird thing of just people posting strange stuff about elections and people that were running. And it kind of helped Twitter grow, even though now we look back and go, hey, that was totally screwed up. And now, in my opinion, Twitter's like a toxic work environment that a lot of people really don't want to go to anymore. Premiered on March 21st, 2004, Deadwood. One of the greatest HBO series ever. I mean, that and Entourage I really liked, and The Wire. Those three shows are great. Deadwood is probably my favorite, and it breaks my heart they only did a few seasons. They did come out with a movie some years later to kind of finish things up, because they kind of ended it abruptly, like they were coming back for another season, and they never did. But it was kind of nice to put an end to it. I just wish this show would have gone on like 6-7 seasons at least. But it is a crime drama that takes place in the 1800s in Deadwood, South Dakota, and features historical figures like Wyatt Earp and Wild Bill Hickok. It starred Timothy Oliphant, I can't even pronounce his name half the time, Ian McShane, Jeffrey Jones, Molly Parker, Powers Booth was in it for a season or two, and Kim Dickens. I love her. Great show. If you've never seen it, watch it. Just be prepared. It's they get a little graphic with the language, and it's a little bloody and a little violent, so keep that in mind. Born on March 21st, 1962, Ferris Bueller, also known as Matthew Broderick. He gained fame in his breakout role as the character Ferris Bueller in Ferris Bueller's Day Off. He starred in Broadway's The Producers. He was also in Godzilla, Inspector Gadget back in the late 1990s. He had a promising high school soccer career, could have gone on to college, but a knee injury ended that. He provided the voice for the adult lion in Simba in the Disney's Lion King. I always liked him. He's always played good characters. Died on March 21st, 2017, Chuck Barris, game show host and creator of The Dating Game and host of The Gong Show. He worked backstage for the music show American Bandstand, and he had actually taken ideas and had meetings about these different game shows, and none of them worked. And finally, for some frickin' reason, The Dating Game worked. They accepted it. So one of my favorite stories about Hollywood or whatever is Chuck Barris's book he wrote. A company gave him money to write a biography about his life. He took the money and he returned with a book called Confessions of a Dangerous Mind. It later was a movie. Now, this was just weird. They're expecting to hear about how he started these game shows and stuff, but it turns out, at least in his book, that he was a spy working for the CIA and an assassin, and he was always the chaperone when they went to other countries, but that was just his cover because he was actually there to assassinate someone. It is just a great movie if you ever get a chance, but he did turn in this book when they thought they were getting a biography about his life. For the longest time, he just played it off like, no, all this stuff really happened, but eventually he said no, he never did any of the assassin stuff. But he did say he was trying to become a member of the CIA or join the CIA before he got into television. Chuck Barris died on March 21st, 2017 of natural causes at the age of 87 at his home in Palisades, New York. All right, that's today's video. Hope you guys enjoyed it. Hope you got some information out of it. Now go out, have a productive day, and be nice to each other.